Detective Ray Collier's hand slides deliberately across the black woman's chest during the pat-down, his fingers lingering where they have no business being. "Stay still," he growls, pressing her against the courthouse wall as his partner watches. She doesn't flinch, doesn't cry out, just stares at him with eyes that promise consequences he can't imagine. "Please," she says quietly, "you're making a mistake." He laughs in her face. "The only mistake is you thinking you belong here, sweetheart." His hand moves lower, groping her hip as morning staff freeze in doorways, phones already recording. "Detective Collier," she says, voice steady as steel. "I will remember this moment." He shoves her toward the exit. "Yeah? Well, I'll forget you in 5 minutes." Before we continue, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Stay with us until the end of this story. You won't believe where this goes. And comment below with your city so we can see how far this story travels. Trust me, you need to see what happens next. The March morning air bit cold against Diane Morrison's skin as she stood outside the federal courthouse at 7:15 a.m., staring at the yellow out-of-order sign taped across her private judicial entrance. She'd been a federal judge for exactly 6 weeks and 2 days, long enough to establish routines, not long enough for those routines to survive equipment failures. She adjusted the shoulder strap of her leather briefcase Italian, a gift to herself after the Senate confirmed her appointment, and walked toward the main public entrance. The building loomed above her, all granite and glass morning sunlight, reflecting off windows that had witnessed decades of American justice, or what passed for it. Detective Ray Collier saw her coming from his position near the metal detectors. 18 years with NYPD, the last 3 assigned to courthouse security after a questionable shooting got him transferred off the streets. He'd worked midnight to 8 a.m. for most of those 3 years, knew the night cleaning crews by name, recognized the third shift maintenance workers by their footsteps, but morning shift. That was foreign territory, and he'd only covered it 4 times total when someone called in sick. Like today, Officer Martinez had food poisoning from bad sushi. Collier got the call at 5:30 a.m. "Need you to cover till noon." He'd said yes because he needed the overtime, even though he hated mornings, hated the crowds, hated the entitled lawyers who streamed through like they owned the place. Now he watched this black woman in her expensive-looking pantsuit walking toward the entrance reserved for court personnel only. Something about her made his jaw tighten. The confident stride, the designer briefcase, the way she carried herself like she belonged somewhere she clearly didn't. "Hold up," he called out, stepping into her path. Diane stopped, recognized the uniform, the badge, prepared herself for what she'd experienced 1,000 times before in 1,000 different variations. "This entrance is restricted," Collier said. "No good morning, no courtesy, just blunt authority." "I understand," Diane replied, keeping her voice level. "My usual entrance is malfunctioning. I need to—" "Usual entrance." Collier cut her off with a sharp laugh. "Lady, the usual entrance for people like you is around back. Defendant check-in. Can't miss it." The words hit her like a slap, but she'd been slapped before. By better men than this, by worse men than this. She maintained her composure, reached for the calm she'd cultivated through years of prosecution work, through law school, through every microaggression that had tried to convince her she didn't belong in spaces she'd earned the right to occupy. "Officer, there's been a misunderstanding. I work here. I need to access—" "You work here." Collier's voice dripped with mockery. He turned to his partner, Steve Hammond, who'd just emerged from the security checkpoint. "Steve, this lady says she works here. You ever seen her before?" Hammond shrugged. "Young guy, maybe 28, fresh transfer from Brooklyn. Still learning courthouse protocols, still learning which questions not to ask." "No, sir, but I've only been here 2 weeks." "Well, I've been here 3 years night shift, and I know every face that belongs in this building after hours. Day shift's different, sure, but I know the look of people who belong." Collier stepped closer to Diane, invading her space, using his height 6'2" to her 5'7" as intimidation. "And you, sweetheart, don't have that look." "What look would that be?" Diane asked quietly. "The look of someone with legitimate business here at 7 in the morning. You're dressed nice, I'll give you that, probably hoping to impress your public defender. But this entrance—" He jabbed a finger toward the door behind him. "Is for authorized personnel only. Judges, clerks, court officers, people who actually work here." "I do work here." "Right. Doing what cleaning because facilities doesn't arrive till 8. Diane felt the familiar heat rising in her chest, the anger she'd learned to transmute into something colder, harder, more useful. She'd prosecuted hate crimes for the Southern District of New York for 12 years before her judicial appointment. She knew how to recognize hatred wearing the mask of authority. "Officer, I'm asking you politely to let me pass. I have obligations that begin at 9 a.m. sharp, and I need time to prepare." "Obligations." Collier rolled the word around like it tasted funny. "What kind of obligations? Court date, sentencing hearing. Let me guess, baby daddy got himself in trouble again." Hammond shifted uncomfortably. Even his inexperience recognized this was going somewhere bad. "Ray, maybe we should just check her ID, or—" "I don't need to check anything," Collier snapped. "I can spot the ones who belong and the ones who don't. And this one," he gestured dismissively at Diane, "definitely doesn't." "Then ask to see my credentials," Diane said, her voice still calm, but with an edge now a prosecutor's edge, honed in 100 courtrooms. "Your credentials." Collier laughed again, louder this time. "Lady, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this ain't the welfare office. You want in this building, you use the public entrance like everyone else. Better yet, come back when you've got an actual appointment." "I don't need an appointment. I work—" "Stop saying that." Collier's voice rose sharply enough to echo off the granite walls. 2 court clerks arriving early stopped on the sidewalk watching. A news van across the street, permanently stationed to catch lawyers arriving for high-profile cases, swiveled its camera toward the commotion. "You don't work here. I've been doing security for 18 years and I can smell a scam from a mile away. You're trying to talk your way into a restricted area, probably looking to steal something or cause trouble or what, Officer Collier?" Diane's eyes had found his nameplate. "What exactly do you think I'm planning to do?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Collier felt his face flush. This woman wasn't acting right, wasn't scared, wasn't backing down, wasn't following the script he'd seen play out dozens of times with people who didn't belong trying to act like they did. "I think you need to leave," he said flatly. "Right now, before this becomes a bigger problem than it needs to be." "The only problem here is your assumption that I don't belong." "It ain't an assumption when I'm right." "You haven't asked me one question that would verify whether you're right or wrong. You haven't asked for identification, haven't asked what department I work for, haven't asked anything except where the baby daddy is." Hammond cleared his throat. "Ray, seriously, maybe we should just— Stay out of this, Hammond." Collier's eyes never left Diane's face. "This is how it works. I've got instincts developed over 18 years of law enforcement. I see someone who doesn't belong, I act. That's my job. That's what keeps this courthouse safe. Safe from what? Black women in business suits." The words cut through the morning air like a blade. Court clerks on the sidewalk pulled out their phones. The news camera zoomed in. Collier felt control slipping away from him, felt this interaction spiraling into something he hadn't intended, but his pride, thick and defensive, wouldn't let him back down. "I don't see color," he said, the reflexive lie of men caught in their own prejudice. "I see behavior, and your behavior is suspicious. You're evasive. You're not providing proper identification when requested. You're attempting to access a restricted entrance without authorization. Those are facts, not assumptions. You never requested identification. That's also a fact. Because people with proper credentials present them automatically. They don't argue. They don't make demands. They understand protocol." "I understand protocol perfectly," Diane said, and there was something in her voice now that should have warned him some note of absolute certainty that men like Collier had trained themselves not to hear. "Which is why I'm asking you one final time to let me pass. And I'm telling you one final time, no." Collier's hand moved to his belt, resting on his radio. "You've got 10 seconds to leave this area voluntarily, or I'm calling for backup and we're removing you by force. Your choice." Diane looked at him for a long moment, studied his face, his posture, the set of his shoulders, made calculations based on 12 years of reading hostile witnesses, violent defendants, men who thought badges excused behavior that would get anyone else arrested. She reached for her briefcase, and Collier's hand went to his gun. "Don't move," he barked. "I'm reaching for my identification," Diane said slowly, carefully. "Since you claim that's what you want to see." "I didn't claim anything. Keep your hands where I can see them." "Then how do I show you my credentials?" "You don't, because you don't have any. This whole performance is you stalling, trying to find a way to talk yourself into somewhere you don't belong. I've seen it 100 times. Have you?" Diane's voice dropped to something colder than the March morning. "Have you seen a federal judge trying to enter her own courthouse for work?" Collier blinked. "What did you say? You heard me, detective? Or were you too busy making assumptions to listen?" "You're not a judge." But uncertainty flickered across his face for the first time. "Check your daily roster. Judge Diane Morrison appointed to the Southern District 6 weeks ago. Courtroom 6A. Criminal docket begins at 9 a.m. I need to review case files before then, which is why I arrive early, which is why I'm standing here at 7:15 in the morning trying to explain to a courthouse security officer that I have every right to be here." Hammond's eyes went wide. "Oh shit, Ray." "She's lying," Collier said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "There's no Judge Morrison. I'd know. I'd have seen the memo." "You work night shift," Diane said. "When was the last time you read an administrative memo about daytime personnel changes?" Collier fumbled. "That's not I would have heard something." "From who? Your night shift supervisor who leaves at 6 a.m., your maintenance crew friends who don't attend judicial staff meetings. Who exactly would have told you about a judge you'd never have reason to encounter?" The logic trapped him, and he knew it. But pride, that same thick defensive pride, pushed him forward anyway. "Anyone can claim to be a judge. Show me proof." "My credentials are in my briefcase, the one you told me not to reach for." "Because you could have a weapon." "Do I look like I'm carrying a weapon?" "Criminals come in all shapes and sizes, lady. I don't profile." The absurdity of the statement, said while profiling her, made Diane's jaw tighten. "Open my briefcase yourself, then. Slowly, carefully. You'll find my judicial identification card, my courthouse access badge, and this morning's case files for the 9 a.m. docket." Collier looked at Hammond. Hammond looked back helplessly. The court clerks on the sidewalk had multiplied to 5, all recording. The news camera had been joined by a photographer from the New York Times who'd been heading into the courthouse and smelled a bigger story. "Ray," Hammond said quietly, "maybe we should just check. If she's really a judge, she's not a judge." But Collier's conviction was crumbling. He reached for Diane's briefcase. She pulled it back. "No, you've had multiple opportunities to verify my identity properly. You chose intimidation instead. I'm not letting you paw through my case files now." "Then you're obstructing a security investigation." "I'm a federal judge refusing an unlawful search by courthouse security who failed to follow basic protocols." "Protocols." Collier's face reddened. "I'll tell you about protocols. When someone refuses to cooperate with security, when they get hostile and evasive, when they start making wild claims about being a judge, call the court administrator's office. They open at 7:30. That's 15 minutes from now. Ask them if Judge Diane Morrison exists, or I could just remove you from the premises right now and sort this out later." "You could. But that would be your third mistake this morning after assuming I don't belong and refusing to verify my credentials. I'd be very careful about making a third mistake, Detective Collier." The warning in her voice finally penetrated his wall of certainty. Collier hesitated, looked at Hammond again, saw his partner's face pale and uncertain, looked back at this black woman who stood her ground with a confidence that didn't match his image of someone trying to scam their way into a courthouse. But he'd gone too far to back down now. Too many witnesses, too many cameras. If he backed down, admitted error, he'd look weak. And Ray Collier had built 18 years of law enforcement on never looking weak. "Steve," he said quietly, "help me escort this individual to the public waiting area. We'll sort out her claims once administration opens." "Ray, I don't think—" "That's an order, Officer Hammond." Hammond looked at Diane with something like apology in his eyes. She saw it, read it, understood that he knew this was wrong, but lacked the courage to stop it. "Don't," she said simply. "Don't touch me." "Then come voluntarily," Collier said, reaching for her arm. Diane stepped back. "I'm ordering you as a federal judge to step aside and let me pass. You're not a federal judge, and even if you were, you don't give me orders. I'm security. You're an unauthorized person attempting to access a restricted area." His hand closed on her bicep. Firm grip, controlling. And that's when everything changed. "Get your hands off me," Diane said, her voice sharp enough to cut stone. "You're being non-compliant," Collier replied, his other hand moving to her opposite arm. "We're going to escort you." "I said, get your hands off me." Diane tried to pull away, and Collier's grip tightened. Hammond moved to her other side, uncertain but following his superior's lead. The court clerk's phones captured every second. The news camera zoomed closer. A Times photographer's shutter clicked rapid fire. "You're making this worse for yourself," Collier said, beginning to pull her backward away from the restricted entrance. "Resisting security is a criminal offense." "I'm not resisting. I'm a federal judge trying to enter my workplace, and you're physically assaulting me." "This isn't assault. This is authorized removal of a non-compliant individual." But his hands didn't move like authorized removal. They moved like something else. Something uglier. As Collier pulled her backward, using her resistance as excuse. His right hand slid from her bicep to her shoulder, then lower fingers trailing across the front of her suit jacket, over her breast, lingering there a second too long to be accidental. Diane froze. Every muscle in her body went rigid with recognition. This wasn't just racial profiling anymore, this was sexual assault. "Don't," she said, her voice dropping to something dangerous. "Don't you dare." "I'm conducting a pat-down for weapons," Collier said, but his hand moved again, sliding down her ribcage toward her hip. "Standard security procedure for non-compliant individuals who might pose a threat." "I'm not armed. I'm a federal judge in business attire at 7:30 in the morning. There's no reasonable suspicion for—" His hand pressed against her hip, then moved to her waist, fingers spreading wide across her lower back, pulling her closer under the guise of control. "Let go of me," Diane said, and for the first time her voice shook. Not with fear, with rage so pure it threatened to burn through her carefully maintained composure. "As soon as you stop resisting," Collier said. His hand moved again, higher this time, across her chest, deliberate, unmistakable. His fingers pressed against her breast through her suit jacket, while Hammond held her other arm, and the cameras captured everything, and court clerks gasped, and Diane Morrison, federal judge, former prosecutor, Harvard law graduate woman who'd spent her entire career fighting for justice, felt justice die in her hands. "You're making a mistake," she said, forcing the words through gritted teeth. "Detective Collier, you are making a catastrophic mistake. The only mistake is you thinking you can talk your way out of this." His hand lingered, squeezed slightly, and Diane saw it in his eyes, the knowledge that he knew exactly what he was doing, the calculation, the power, the assumption that she was powerless to stop him. She could have said it then. Could have shouted, "I'm a federal judge," loud enough for everyone to hear. Could have ended this with 2 words that would have made Collier and Hammond release her like she'd turned radioactive. But she didn't, because she needed them to finish. Needed them to complete this act so thoroughly that no amount of excuses, no wall of blue brotherhood, no dismissive internal investigation could erase what they were doing. She needed the cameras to capture every second of 2 courthouse security officers sexually assaulting and physically removing a black woman who was trying to enter her own workplace. She needed the evidence to be undeniable. So she went limp, stopped resisting, let them drag her backward across the courthouse plaza, while Collier's hand stayed pressed against her body in places it had no legal, moral, or professional right to be. Let them pull her past the horrified court clerks and the clicking cameras and the gathering morning crowd of lawyers and defendants and journalists who would never forget what they were watching. Diane's Louboutin heels scraped across concrete. Her briefcase, still in her grip, dragged behind her. The March wind caught her hair, pulling it loose from its neat bun. She maintained eye contact with Collier the entire time, her gaze promising consequences. He couldn't imagine memorizing every detail of his face for the moment when roles would reverse. They pulled her 20 feet from the entrance, 30, 40, all the way to the public sidewalk where they finally released her. "There," Collier said, breathing slightly hard from the exertion and adrenaline. "Public area, where you belong. You want into the courthouse, you wait for the public entrance to open at 8 like everyone else. You want to file a complaint about this, you can do that too. Won't go anywhere. You were non-compliant with security and I followed proper protocols. But hey, it's your right." He smiled. Actually smiled, like he'd won something. Diane straightened her jacket slowly, picked up her briefcase, brushed concrete dust from her pants. When she looked up, her face was a mask of perfect professional composure that terrified Hammond because he'd seen prosecutors wear that face right before they destroyed defendants on cross-examination. "Detective Collier," she said quietly, "do you remember what I said? That you're making a mistake?" "Yeah, I remember. And like I said, I'll forget you in 5 minutes." "No." Diane's smile was sharp as broken glass. "You won't. You'll remember this morning for the rest of your life. You'll remember it when you lose your badge. You'll remember it when you lose your pension. You'll remember it when you're sitting in a federal courtroom as a defendant instead of a court officer. You'll remember it every single time you close your eyes." Big talk from someone who just got thrown out of a courthouse. Not thrown out, detective. Temporarily prevented from entering. There's a difference. One that will matter very much when administration opens in... She checked her watch. 7 minutes. Something in her certainty made Collier's smile flicker. "What happens in 7 minutes?" "You find out exactly who I am and exactly how badly you miscalculated." Diane turned to Hammond. "Officer Hammond, you still have time to make a different choice than your partner. You can walk away from this. Report what happened. Separate yourself from what's coming. Or you can stand with him and face the same consequences. Your choice. But choose quickly." Hammond looked at Collier, then back at Diane. I was following orders." "So were the guards at Nuremberg. Didn't help them much." Diane picked up her briefcase. 7 minutes, gentlemen. I'll be in the public waiting area. When administration calls down here looking for whoever prevented Judge Morrison from accessing her courtroom, you'll know where to find me." She walked away, heels clicking on concrete, back straight as a blade. The cameras followed her. The court clerks whispered urgently into phones. The Times photographer kept shooting, capturing Collier's face as understanding began to dawn too late, far too late, that something had gone terribly wrong. Hammond grabbed Collier's arm. "Ray, what if she's telling the truth? What if she really is a judge?" "She's not," Collier said, but his voice had lost its conviction. "She can't be. I would have known. Someone would have told me." "You work night shift. How would you know about day shift personnel changes?" Collier stopped, looked at the retreating figure of Diane Morrison, looked at the cameras still recording, looked at the growing crowd of courthouse employees arriving for work, all of them staring at him with expressions ranging from shock to disgust to something that looked like pity. His radio crackled. "Security desk, this is Chief Administrator Wallace. I need to speak with whoever's on duty at the main entrance immediately." Hammond's face went white. Collier's hand trembled as he reached for his radio. "This is Detective Collier. I'm at the main entrance." "Detective Collier, has Judge Morrison arrived yet? I have several urgent messages that need to reach her before the 9 a.m. docket. She's not answering her cell, and her private entrance is malfunctioning." The world stopped. Traffic noise faded. The crowd's murmurs silenced. Collier stood frozen with his radio in his hand, and the truth crashing down on him like a building collapse. "Judge Morrison," he repeated numbly. "Yes. Judge Diane Morrison, Criminal Court Courtroom 6A, appointed 6 weeks ago. Young black woman usually arrives early. Have you seen her?" Collier's eyes found Diane across the plaza. She was looking back at him, phone to her ear, speaking with someone, Probably Wallace, probably confirming everything, probably sealing his fate with every word. His voice failed. He tried again. Sir, there's been a situation. What kind of situation? I might have prevented Judge Morrison from entering the building. Silence on the radio. Long, horrible silence. Then you what? There was a woman claiming to be a judge, but she didn't have proper identification, and she was acting suspicious, and Did this woman tell you she was a judge? Yes, but I thought she was lying because I didn't recognize her, and Detective Collier, did you ask to see her credentials? She wouldn't show them. Did you ask? The question hung like a noose. Collier's silence was answer enough. Did you ask to see her courthouse ID? Wallace's voice had gone cold. Did you ask which department she worked for? Did you follow any standard verification protocol before deciding a federal judge was lying about her identity? I used my professional judgment based on 18 years. Did you put your hands on Judge Morrison? Collier's throat closed. Hammond had backed away from him, distancing himself physically from what was coming. I asked you a direct question, Detective. Did you physically touch Judge Morrison? I escorted her from the restricted area, using approved security protocols for non-compliant individuals. Non-compliant. Wallace's voice could have frozen nitrogen. You're telling me that a federal judge attempting to enter her own courthouse for work was non-compliant. She wouldn't provide identification when requested. Because you never requested it. I'm looking at security footage right now, Detective. I can see the entire interaction. You never asked for ID. You never asked her department. You never asked a single verification question. You saw a black woman and assumed she didn't belong. Then when she told you she was a judge, you physically removed her from courthouse property. And, Detective, yes, sir. I can see exactly where your hands were during that removal. I can see what you were doing, and so can every camera that recorded this incident. So I'm going to ask you one more time, did you put your hands on a federal judge? The question wasn't really a question. It was a trap with one exit, and that exit led straight off a cliff. Yes, sir, Collier whispered. Stay exactly where you are. Don't move. Don't leave your post. Don't speak to anyone. Internal Affairs is on their way down right now, and they'll want to interview you and Officer Hammond immediately. Do you understand? Yes, sir. And Detective, you just ended your career. I hope whatever you thought you were protecting was worth it. The radio went dead. Collier stood in the March morning with his entire future collapsing around him like a controlled demolition. 18 years of law enforcement, 3 years of courthouse security, decades of pension contributions and career advancement and professional respect, all of it gone in the time it took to grab a black woman's arm and assume she didn't belong. Hammond was already walking away, trying to put distance between himself and the catastrophe. Court clerks were speaking urgently into phones. Lawyers arriving for early hearings stopped to watch. The news camera had been joined by 2 others, all of them recording Collier's face as understanding horror and sick realization played across his features. Across the plaza, Diane Morrison ended her phone call. She looked at Collier one more time. No anger in her expression. No triumph. Just cold, absolute certainty that justice, real justice, not the corrupted version Collier had been enforcing, was about to arrive. She mouthed 2 words, "I warned you." Then she walked into the courthouse through the public entrance that had opened at 8 a.m. sharp, briefcase in hand, head high, looking every inch the federal judge she'd been all along. Collier watched her disappear into the building where in 55 minutes she'd preside over her courtroom, the building where in the weeks to come she'd preside over his trial. Because that's what happened when you grabbed a judge, when you put your hands on her body without consent, when you assumed the color of her skin meant she couldn't possibly hold power over you. You found out exactly how wrong assumptions could be, and you paid for it with everything you had. Internal Affairs arrived 6 minutes later. They found Detective Ray Collier exactly where Wallace had told him to stay, staring at the courthouse entrance like a man watching his entire life walk away from him. Which in every way that mattered, he was. 3 hours later, Ray Collier sat in interview room C with his union rep, a tired-looking man named Marcus Chen, who'd defended dozens of cops over 20 years and had never seen a case this bad. Internal Affairs had separated him from Hammond immediately. Standard protocol. Keep witnesses apart so they can't coordinate stories. Not that Collier had a story. He had a disaster. Lieutenant Sarah Vance sat across the metal table digital recorder running case file thick as a phone book already spread before her. She'd been with IA for 12 years, seen plenty of bad shoots evidence tampering domestic violence cases involving officers. But a cop sexually assaulting a federal judge, that was new territory even for her. "Detective Collier," she began, voice professional and cold. "You've been read your rights. You've waived your right to an attorney and agreed to speak with your union representative present. Is that correct?" "Yes," Collier said. His voice sounded hollow even to himself. "Good. Let's start with this morning. 7:15 a.m., main courthouse entrance. Walk me through what happened." Collier looked at Chen, who nodded slightly. "Tell the truth. The cameras already told most of it anyway. Lying now would only make things worse." "I was covering morning shift as emergency replacement for Officer Martinez. I saw a black woman approaching the restricted entrance. She was well-dressed, professional-looking, carrying an expensive briefcase." "And what made you stop her?" "She was using the wrong entrance. That entrance is for authorized court personnel only." "Did she tell you she was authorized court personnel?" Collier hesitated. "She claimed to work there." "Claimed? You didn't believe her." I thought she was trying to talk her way into a restricted area." "Based on what evidence?" "Based on the fact that I didn't recognize her. I've worked courthouse security for 3 years. I know the faces." "You work night shift, Detective. When was the last time you worked a morning shift?" "About 4 months ago, 1 day." "So you're not familiar with day shift personnel?" "Not as familiar, no, but..." "But what?" Collier's jaw tightened. "I have instincts. 18 years of law enforcement. I can tell when something's off." "What was off about Judge Morrison?" The name hit him like a fist. Judge Morrison. Not the woman, or the individual, or the subject. Judge Morrison. Federal appointee, member of the judiciary, someone so far above his pay grade that touching her without consent was career suicide. "I didn't know she was a judge," Collier said, "because you didn't ask, correct?" "She should have identified herself." "She did identify herself, Detective. Multiple witnesses confirm she told you she was a judge. You chose not to believe her. Why? Silence. The answer: because she was black, because she didn't match his mental image of authority, because 18 years of policing had trained him to see black people as suspects rather than colleagues, sat like poison on his tongue. "I thought she was lying," he finally said. "Why would someone lie about being a federal judge? That's a claim easily verified, a claim that if false would get her arrested immediately. What possible benefit would lying about that provide? People lie all the time to gain access to places they don't belong. Do they lie about being federal judges specifically? I've seen people claim all kinds of things." "Answer the question, Detective. In your 18 years of law enforcement, how many times have you encountered someone falsely claiming to be a federal judge?" Collier's silence was answer enough. Vance leaned forward. "Let's talk about what happened after Judge Morrison identified herself. She asked you to verify her credentials correct. She was being evasive about showing identification." "No, Detective. She told you her credentials were in her briefcase and offered to let you examine them. Multiple witnesses confirm this. You refused. Why?" "Because I was following security protocols for suspicious individuals." "What was suspicious about her?" The trap again. Every answer led back to the same ugly truth. "She was attempting to access a restricted entrance," Collier said weakly. "An entrance she had every right to use, an entrance that was her normal entry point before it malfunctioned. An entrance you would have known she used regularly if you'd bothered to check with day shift supervisors or read personnel updates or done literally anything except assume a black woman didn't belong in a federal courthouse." "I don't see race." Vance's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Detective, I've reviewed security footage going back 8 months. Yes. You've stopped and questioned 17 people of color trying to use that entrance. Lawyers, court reporters, translators, even a U.S. Marshal once. You stopped 0 white people. 0. So please don't insult my intelligence by claiming you don't see race." Chen put a hand on Collier's arm. Lieutenant, my client made an error in judgment. He's acknowledged that. But this characterization of systematic racism is supported by video evidence, statistical analysis, and witness testimony. Your client has a pattern of discriminatory behavior spanning years. This morning was just the first time he targeted someone with the power to hold him accountable. Vance pulled out photographs, crime scene quality, high resolution. Collier's stomach dropped when he saw them. Let's talk about the physical contact, detective. You grabbed Judge Morrison's arm. Here. She tapped a photo showing his hand on Diane's bicep. Then you moved your hand to her shoulder. Here. Another photo. Then across her chest. Here. The photo showed it clearly. Collier's hand spread across Diane Morrison's breast fingers, pressing against fabric, her face captured in profile with an expression of controlled rage that made him want to crawl out of his skin. That's not what it looks like, Collier said. Really, what does it look like? Detective, I was conducting a pat-down for weapons. A pat-down on a woman in business attire carrying nothing but a briefcase. A woman who made no threatening gestures. A woman who you'd already determined was trying to access a courthouse, not attack anyone. You felt a pat-down was necessary. She was non-compliant. She was a federal judge trying to go to work. And even if she was non-compliant, even if she was the criminal you assumed she was, this, Vance tapped the photo again, is not how you conduct a lawful pat-down. You know that. I know that. Every officer who's ever been through basic training knows that. Chen cleared his throat. Lieutenant, without conceding anything, suppose my client made errors in judgment this morning. What exactly are we looking at here? Vance's smile was cold. Federal civil rights violations. Sexual assault under color of law. Deprivation of rights under color of law. Possibly obstruction of justice, since he prevented a federal judge from performing her duties. The U.S. Attorney's Office is already involved. They're treating this as a federal case. The words hit Collier like individual bullets. Federal case, not internal discipline, not a suspension or demotion. Federal prosecution, prison time, sex offender registry. You can't be serious, he said. I'm completely serious, detective. You sexually assaulted a federal judge on camera. You think that's going away with a slap on the wrist? I didn't assault anyone. I was doing my job. Your job is to protect the courthouse and the people in it. Judge Morrison is one of those people. You didn't protect her. You victimized her. She should have shown me ID. She offered to show you ID. You refused. Then you put your hands on her body without consent. That's assault, detective. The fact that you were wearing a badge when you did it makes it worse, not better. Collier's hands shook. He pressed them flat against the table, trying to stop the trembling. This is bullshit. I've served 18 years. I've got commendations. I've protected this courthouse for 3 years. One mistake, and you're throwing me to the wolves. One mistake. Vance's voice rose for the first time. Detective, we have 17 documented incidents of you targeting people of color. We have audio recordings of you using racial slurs in the break room. We have witness statements describing your behavior as discriminatory for years. This wasn't one mistake. This was a pattern of behavior that finally hit someone who couldn't be ignored or dismissed. She pulled out a tablet, turned it toward him, pressed play. Collier's own voice filled the room. These people think wearing a suit makes them belong everywhere. I can smell trouble before they even open their mouths. My job is keeping the riffraff out. I don't care what degree they claim to have. The recording continued. More voices. His colleagues in the break room, some laughing, some silent. Collier's voice again. Had to put this uppity black woman in her place this morning, probably here for her baby daddy's sentencing. Vance stopped the recording. That was from 3 weeks ago, about a different black woman, a defense attorney as it turns out. She filed a complaint. It was dismissed by your supervisor as personality conflict. Want to guess who your supervisor is? Sergeant Morrison, Collier whispered. Sergeant Tom Morrison. No relation to Judge Morrison, but plenty of relation to you, your drinking buddy, your golf partner. The man who's dismissed every complaint filed against you for 3 years. He's being interviewed right now in a different room. Funny thing, when his career's on the line, he's a lot less loyal than when it was just complaints from black lawyers he could ignore. Chen was scribbling notes furiously. "Lieutenant, I need time to consult with my client." "Take all the time you want. The evidence isn't changing. The charges aren't changing. The only question is whether Detective Collier cooperates now or fights this and makes it worse for himself." "Cooperates how?" Chen asked. "Full confession. Acknowledge the pattern of discrimination. Testify against Sergeant Morrison and anyone else who enabled this behavior. In exchange, we might recommend reduced charges." Might. The U.S. Attorney's Office wants to make an example of this case, but cooperation could mean the difference between 3 years and 10. 10 years? Collier's voice cracked. "For what?" I grabbed her arm. "I moved her out of a restricted area. That's my job." "You sexually assaulted a federal judge detective. You groped her, on camera, in front of witnesses, while she was trying to go to work. You can call it whatever you want, but the law calls it what it is." Vance stood gathering her files. "I'm giving you 24 hours to decide. Cooperate or don't. But understand this, Judge Morrison isn't going away. She's not dropping charges. She's not accepting an apology. She's pursuing this through every legal channel available. And she's got resources you can't imagine. The ACLU is already offering support. The NAACP, the National Organization for Black Judges. Civil rights attorneys are lining up to represent her pro bono. You picked a fight with someone who spent 12 years as a federal prosecutor. Someone who knows exactly how to destroy you in court." She walked to the door, paused. "One more thing. Judge Morrison could have identified herself immediately this morning. Could have ended the whole thing with 2 words. You know why she didn't?" Collier said nothing. "Because she wanted you to finish. She wanted the cameras to capture everything. She wanted evidence so clear that no one could claim misunderstanding or confusion. She let you assault her so she could make sure you'd pay for it. That's how prosecutors think detective. They build cases. And you just handed her the perfect case on a silver platter." The door closed behind her with a sound like a cell locking. Chen looked at Collier with something like pity. "Ray, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've saved careers that looked unsavable, but this, I don't know if this is savable." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you need to seriously consider cooperation. Full confession testimony against your supervisor, whatever they want. Because if this goes to trial, you're going to lose. Juries don't like cops who abuse power. They really don't like cops who sexually assault women. And they absolutely won't forgive a cop who did both to a federal judge. I didn't sexually assault anyone." "Ray, I watched the video. Your hand was on her breast for 4 seconds. 4 seconds. That's not a pat-down. That's not an accident. That's assault. And a jury will see it the same way." Collier dropped his head into his hands. "This wasn't supposed to happen. She was just supposed to leave. If she'd just shown me ID, she did offer to show you ID. You refused to look. You wanted her gone, so you got rid of her. And it turned out she was exactly who she said she was." Chen closed his notebook. "I'll come back tomorrow. Think about cooperation. Think about your family. Think about whether fighting this is worth losing everything." "I've already lost everything." "Not yet. You've still got a chance to avoid prison. That's not nothing." Chen stood. 24 hours, Ray. Use them wisely." Then he was gone too, and Collier sat alone in interview room C with the digital recorder still running, and his entire life reduced to a decision between bad options and worse ones. Across the courthouse in courtroom 6A, Judge Diane Morrison presided over the 9 a.m. criminal docket with the same composure she'd shown that morning. Defendants were arraigned. Bail was set. Motions were heard. Her voice never wavered. Her judgments never faltered. No one watching would have known that 3 hours earlier she'd been groped and dragged across courthouse concrete. But her clerk knew. Jennifer Davis, who'd worked with Diane since her appointment, saw the tightness around her eyes, the extra care she took with each word, the way her hand trembled slightly when she thought no one was looking. During the lunch recess, Jennifer brought coffee to Chambers, found Diane standing at the window staring out at the plaza where Collier had grabbed her. "You okay?" Jennifer asked quietly. "No," Diane said. "But I will be." The courthouse is going crazy. Everyone's talking about what happened. Videos already on Twitter. The New York Times has a reporter camped outside. The chief judge's office has called 3 times. Let them call. I'm not hiding from this. No one expects you to hide, but you could take the day, process what happened. If I take the day, then Collier wins. He gets what he wanted, me gone, not doing my job. I won't give him that satisfaction. Jennifer set down the coffee. Diane, he assaulted you. You're allowed to be affected by that. I am affected. I'm furious. I'm violated. I'm humiliated. Diane turned from the window, and Jennifer saw tears she'd been holding back all morning. I'm a federal judge, Jen. I've sentenced murderers. I've presided over terrorism cases. I've made decisions that affected thousands of lives. And this morning, a courthouse cop made me feel powerless. You're not powerless. I felt powerless. When his hand was on me, when he was groping me in front of everyone, for those 30 seconds, I was just another black woman being told she didn't belong. The robe didn't matter. The appointment didn't matter. My credentials didn't matter. All that mattered was the color of my skin and his assumption that gave him the right to put his hands on my body. Jennifer moved closer. So what are you going to do? I'm going to destroy him. Diane's voice went cold. I'm going to prosecute this case myself if I have to recuse from the bench to do it. I'm going to make sure Ray Collier and every cop like him understands that black women aren't powerless, that we're not their victims, that when they put their hands on us, there are consequences. The U.S. Attorney's Office already filed charges. I know. Amanda Chen called me. She's handling it personally. But I'm going to be involved every step of the way. Victim statements, trial testimony, whatever it takes. People will say you're vindictive, that you're using your position to punish someone for a mistake. Let them say it. I'd rather be called vindictive than let this slide. How many other women has Collier touched? How many other black people has he harassed? How many complaints were filed and dismissed because his supervisor was his friend? Diane's hands clenched into fists. This ends, not just for me, for everyone he's victimized. Jennifer nodded slowly. The chief judge wants to implement new protocols, mandatory bias training, independent review of complaints. She's calling it the Morrison Protocol. Good. That's a start. But protocols don't matter if people don't follow them. What matters is accountability, real consequences for real actions. You're going to change things, aren't you? This case is going to change everything. I hope so. Because if being sexually assaulted by courthouse security doesn't change things, what will? Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Saw the news. Call me. Love you. Then her sister. That cop is dead. Want me to come up there? Then her law school classmates, her former colleagues from the prosecutor's office, her friends from Harvard, all of them reaching out with shock and support and rage on her behalf. But one text stood out. From Chief Judge Patricia Williams, my office. When you're ready, not rushing you, just want you to know I'm here. Diane looked at Jennifer. Tell Judge Williams I'll be there in 10 minutes. You don't have to go now. She said when you're ready. I am ready. Sitting here feeling violated doesn't help anyone. Taking action does. 10 minutes later, Diane sat in Chief Judge Williams' chambers, a corner office with mahogany furniture and photographs of Williams with 3 presidents. Williams herself was 68, appointed by Clinton, one of the first black women on the federal bench in the Southern District. Coffee, tea, something stronger? Williams asked. Water's fine. Williams poured from a crystal pitcher, handed Diane a glass, then sat across from her with an expression of controlled fury. I've been a judge for 27 years. I've never seen anything like what happened to you this morning. I imagine you've experienced plenty like it, just never on camera. Fair point. Williams sipped her own water. I've been stopped by courthouse security exactly 4 times in 27 years. Always young officers who don't recognize me. Always happens to look confused about why a black woman is using the judge's entrance, but none of them ever put their hands on me. Times change. Racism doesn't. No, it just evolves. Get smarter about hiding. Williams set down her glass. Diane, I want you to know that this courthouse stands with you. Every judge I've spoken to today is outraged. The Bar Association is already drafting a response. The ACLU is offering resources. You're not fighting this alone. I appreciate that. But I also want you to understand what's coming. This case is going to be national news. Cable news will debate it. Conservative commentators will defend Collier. They'll say you're playing the race card, using your position to punish a cop for doing his job, making a mountain out of a molehill. They'll dig into your past, looking for anything to discredit you. Your personal life, your professional decisions, your college years, everything becomes fair game. I know. Do you? Because it's going to be vicious. They'll try to make you the villain. The angry black woman with a chip on her shoulder. The activist judge who hates police. They'll find ways to make Collier's sympathetic family man, veteran officer, honest mistake. Are you prepared for that? Diane met Williams's eyes steadily. Judge Williams, I spent 12 years prosecuting criminals who tried to destroy my credibility. I've been called worse things than angry black woman by better people than conservative commentators. I've had defense attorneys attack my character, my integrity, my motivations. I've sat through cross-examinations designed to make me look incompetent or biased or vindictive, and I won. Every single time I won, because I had the truth on my side. This is different. This time, you're the victim, not the prosecutor. I'm both. And that's what terrifies them. Diane leaned forward. For once, the victim has power. The victim has resources. The victim knows exactly how the system works and how to make it work for justice instead of against it. That's what they can't stand, a black woman who refuses to be powerless. William smiled, and it was fierce. You know what I think? Collier picked the worst possible person to assault. Someone else might have let it go, accepted an apology, moved on. But you're going to burn his career to the ground, aren't you? I'm going to hold him accountable. If his career burns, that's on him. Good. William stood, walked to her window, overlooking the same plaza where Collier had grabbed Diane. I've watched too many officers get away with too much for too long. Watched complaints get dismissed. Watched victims get ignored. Watched the system protect men who abuse their power. Maybe this time it'll be different. It will be different. I'll make sure of it. The Morrison Protocol is just the beginning. I want independent oversight of all courthouse security, civilian review boards, mandatory body cameras, real consequences for discrimination. Will you help me design it? Absolutely. And Diane, Williams turned back to face her. Take care of yourself. You're strong, but you're human. What happened this morning was traumatic. Don't pretend it wasn't. I won't pretend, but I also won't let it break me. I know you won't. That's why I asked for you to be appointed to this courthouse. I saw your record as a prosecutor, saw how you handled difficult cases with grace and strength, knew you'd be an exceptional judge, and you are. Don't let one racist cop make you doubt that. Diane felt tears threaten again, but pushed them back. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just promise me you'll see this through, all the way, no matter how hard it gets. I promise. They shook hands, and Diane left chambers feeling lighter somehow. The violation was still there. The humiliation still burned. But purpose, clear, absolute purpose, gave her strength. She had an afternoon docket to preside over, cases to hear, justice to administer, and a reckoning to plan. Because Ray Collier had made one catastrophic miscalculation, he'd assumed the woman he groped was powerless. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. 3 days after the assault, Assistant U.S. Attorney Amanda Chen sat in her office reviewing evidence that kept getting worse for Ray Collier. She'd prosecuted corrupt cops before, but this case had everything: video evidence, credible witnesses, a victim with impeccable credentials, and a defendant whose own words condemned him. Her phone rang. The caller ID showed Judge Morrison's chambers. Amanda Chen. Amanda, it's Diane. Do you have a few minutes? For you, absolutely. How are you holding up? There was a pause. I'm functional, angry, determined, the usual. Amanda heard what Diane wasn't saying, the trauma underneath the professional veneer. I'm building the strongest case possible. Collier's going down for this. I know you are. That's actually why I'm calling. I want to be involved, more than just victim testimony. I want to help build this case. Amanda hesitated. Diane, you're the victim. Your involvement beyond testimony could create complications. Defense will argue bias, claim you're orchestrating a vendetta. Let them argue it. I spent 12 years as a prosecutor. I know how to build cases that stick. And I know Collier's type. He's not going down without a fight. He'll claim mistakes, misunderstandings, anything to avoid accountability. I want to make sure that doesn't work. It won't work. The evidence is overwhelming. Evidence can be explained away if you're not careful. I've seen defense attorneys turn slam-dunk cases into acquittals because prosecutors got complacent. I don't want that happening here. Amanda leaned back in her chair. What exactly are you proposing? Let me review the evidence. Give me access to witness statements, video analysis, everything you're planning to present. I won't interfere with your prosecution, but I can offer insights, things a prosecutor might miss because they're not the one who was assaulted. Diane, that's highly irregular. So is a federal judge being sexually assaulted by courthouse security. Nothing about this case is regular. Amanda couldn't argue with that. All right, but you're consulting only. No direct involvement in trial strategy. No contact with witnesses beyond your own testimony. And if the defense finds out I'm claiming you acted without my knowledge. Deal. When can I see the file? Come by tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., and Diane, bring coffee. This is going to take a while. The next morning, Diane arrived at the U.S. Attorney's office with 2 large coffees and a legal pad already half filled with notes. Amanda spread the case file across her conference table, hundreds of pages of statements, videos, photographs, forensic analysis. Let's start with what we have, Amanda began. Video evidence from 7 different angles showing the entire interaction. Audio from Collier's body camera, which he forgot to turn off, capturing everything he said. Witness statements from 12 courthouse employees who saw the assault. Security footage going back 8 months, showing Collier's pattern of discriminatory behavior. Diane studied the timeline Amanda had constructed. What about Collier's personnel file? 18 years of generally positive reviews, 3 commendations, 2 complaints that were dismissed. His supervisor calls him an exemplary officer. His supervisor, who's also under investigation for dismissing those complaints. Sergeant Tom Morrison, your namesake, no relation. He's cooperating now that his own career is on the line, giving us everything on Collier break room conversations, off-the-record complaints, incidents that never made it into official reports. What kind of incidents? Amanda pulled out a separate folder. According to Morrison, Collier's been problematic for years. Racial comments disguised as jokes, aggressive behavior toward minorities, pattern of targeting black courthouse visitors for extra scrutiny. But Morrison covered for him because they were friends, and he figured Collier was old school rather than actively racist. Old school is just another word for racist, Diane said flatly. I agree. And Morrison's learning that covering for racism makes you complicit in it. He's looking at discipline, possible demotion, but his testimony against Collier could be valuable. Diane flipped through Morrison's statement. This is good, but it's not enough. Defense will paint him as a disloyal colleague trying to save himself. We need other witnesses, other victims. We're working on that. Putting out calls through civil rights organizations, bar associations, asking anyone who's had negative interactions with Collier to come forward. How many responses so far? 23, ranging from verbal harassment to aggressive questioning to physical contact. We're interviewing everyone, building a pattern that shows this wasn't one bad morning. This is who Collier is. Diane's jaw tightened as she read through the preliminary victim statements. A black defense attorney forced to show 3 forms of ID, while white colleagues walked past unchallenged. An Asian court reporter interrogated about using a staff entrance she'd accessed for 5 years. A Latino interpreter physically blocked from entering until he proved his credentials, something Collier never required from white interpreters. This is systemic, Diane said quietly. It's not just Collier, it's a culture that allowed this behavior for years. Which is why Chief Judge Williams wants to implement those new protocols. But first we have to win this case. If Collier walks every other racist cop in every other courthouse, we'll know they can get away with it too. He's not walking. What's the defense strategy? Amanda pulled out notes from Collier's attorney. Marcus Chen is good, but he's got nothing to work with. Best he can do is claim Collier made an honest mistake, didn't know you were a judge, was following security protocols never intended to assault you. He'll emphasize Collier's clean record, his years of service paint him as a dedicated officer who had one bad interaction. That doesn't explain the groping. No, it doesn't. That's where this case becomes unwinnable for him. Everything else, the stopping you, the questioning, even the physical removal, could potentially be defended as overzealous security. But the moment his hand lingered on your body, the moment he groped you, it became sexual assault. And there's no legitimate law enforcement justification for sexual assault. Diane stared at the photographs, showing Collier's hand on her breast. His fingers spread across her hip. Even seeing the images made her skin crawl with remembered violation. He knew what he was doing, she said. That wasn't accident or confusion. He used the pat-down as cover to assault me. I know, and a jury will see that. But we need to be prepared for Chen to argue that it looked worse than it was, that camera angles can be deceiving, that physical contact during a security situation isn't always clear-cut. Then we need expert testimony. Someone who can explain proper pat-down procedures versus what Collier did. Already lined up. Former FBI training instructor, 30 years of experience teaching proper search techniques. She'll testify that Collier's hands were in all the wrong places for all the wrong reasons. Good. What about Collier himself? Is he testifying? Chen hasn't decided. It's risky puts Collier on the stand where you can cross-examine him. But not testifying might make him look guilty of something worse than he's claiming. Diane smiled grimly. I'm not cross-examining him. You are. I'm the victim, remember. But I can help you prepare. I know how men like Collier think. I've cross-examined hundreds of them. Then help me anticipate his defenses. Amanda pulled out a legal pad. If he testifies, what's he going to say? He'll stick to the honest mistake narrative. Emphasize that he was covering an unfamiliar shift, didn't recognize me, was just trying to maintain courthouse security. He'll express regret for the misunderstanding while denying any racist or sexual intent. How do we counter that? By showing it wasn't a misunderstanding. He never asked my name, never requested identification, never attempted any verification before deciding I didn't belong, and when I told him I was a judge, he didn't believe me because black women don't look like judges to him. Can we prove that last part? The audio recording proves it. When I said I was a judge, he laughed. Laughed Amanda. That's not confusion or caution. That's dismissal, based on the assumption that someone who looks like me couldn't possibly hold that position. Amanda scribbled notes furiously. What about the sexual assault aspect? How does he defend that? He can't. Not really. He'll claim it was an appropriate pat-down, that his hands went where they needed to go for security purposes. But the video timestamps show his hand on my breast for 4 full seconds. That's not a pat-down, that's groping. 4 seconds feels like nothing when you describe it. How do we make a jury understand how violating that was? Diane was quiet for a moment, her hands clenched in her lap. You make them imagine it happening to someone they love, their wife, their daughter, their mother. You ask them if a cop grabbed your loved one's breast and held it for 4 seconds. Would you call that a pat-down? Or would you call it what it is? Sexual assault? That's good. That's really good. I've had 12 years to learn how to make juries feel what victims feel. That's the key, making abstract violations concrete and personal. They worked through lunch building a prosecution strategy that anticipated every defense argument. By 2 p.m., Amanda had a trial outline that felt unbeatable. There's one more thing we need to address, Amanda said carefully. Your victim impact statement at sentencing. Have you thought about what you want to say? I've thought about it constantly. I lie awake thinking about it. And I want to make sure every cop, every security guard, every person with a badge and a gun understands that black women are not their victims anymore, that we have power now, that when they put their hands on us, there are consequences that can't be dismissed or covered up or explained away. That's the anger talking, which is valid. You should be angry, but for maximum impact, you need more than anger. What do you suggest? Tell your story. Not as a judge, but as a woman. Talk about how it felt to be groped in front of your colleagues. How it felt to be treated like a criminal in your own workplace. How it felt to have your humanity dismissed because of your skin color. Make it personal. Make it real. Diane nodded slowly. I can do that. But I also want to talk about the bigger picture. How many other Black women have been treated this way? How many assaults have gone unreported because the victims had no power, no platform, no way to fight back Collier's going to prison? But there are hundreds more like him. Thousands. This case needs to be a message that the system is changing. It will be. I promise you that. As Diane gathered her notes to leave, Amanda's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her expression hardened. What is it? Diane asked. Media request. Fox News wants to interview Collier. They're offering him airtime to tell his side of the story. Of course they are. When? Tomorrow night. Prime time. They're framing it as officer under fire for doing his job versus activist judge with an agenda. Diane felt rage flood through her veins. They're going to make him sympathetic, the veteran cop whose life is being destroyed by one mistake. Probably. But here's the thing. If he does that interview, he's locked into whatever story he tells. No changing it later. No claiming he was misunderstood. Everything he says can be used against him. You want him to do the interview. I want him to hang himself on national television, and I think he will. Men like Collier can't help themselves. They think they're smart enough to control the narrative. They think if they just explain it right, everyone will understand. Then they get challenged and fall apart. Exactly. Let him do the interview. Let him think he's winning. Then we'll use every word against him in court. That evening, Diane sat in her apartment, a converted brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the East River, and watched the news coverage of her case. CNN led with it. MSNBC had legal analysts debating the charges. Even local news ran segments about courthouse security and racial profiling. Her phone rang constantly. Old law school friends offering support. Former colleagues from the prosecutor's office expressing outrage. Her mother calling from Atlanta, voice tight with worry. Baby, are you safe? Do you need me to come up there? I'm fine, Mom, I promise. Fine. A police officer put his hands on you. That's not fine. I know, but I'm handling it. I'm going to make sure he pays for what he did. Don't let revenge consume you, Diane. I know you're angry. This isn't about revenge. It's about justice. There's a difference. Her mother sighed. Your father would be proud of you. Standing up, fighting back. He always said you had more courage than sense. Diane smiled despite herself. Her father had died when she was in law school, heart attack at 57, stress from 30 years of practicing civil rights law in the South. He'd fought his whole career against the same racism she faced this morning. I wish he could see this, Diane said quietly. Oh, baby, he can see it, and he's cheering you on. After they hung up, Diane poured herself a glass of wine and stood at the windows, watching the city lights reflect off the dark water. Tomorrow, Collier would do his Fox News interview, the day after her own deposition for the case, then preliminary hearings, jury selection trial. Months of her life consumed by this case. Months of reliving the assault every time she testified, answered questions, reviewed evidence. Months of being called angry, vindictive, playing the race card, using her position to punish a cop for doing his job. But she'd endured worse. She'd survived law school as one of 6 black women in her class, survived 12 years as a prosecutor in a system that constantly questioned her competence. Survived the Senate confirmation process, where senators had asked whether she could be impartial in cases involving race, a question never asked of white judges. She'd survived all of it by refusing to be what people expected, refusing to be quiet, grateful, non-threatening, refusing to make herself smaller so others could feel bigger. Ray Collier wanted her to be powerless, expected her to be powerless, based his entire worldview on black women being powerless. He was about to learn exactly how wrong expectations could be. The next evening, the Fox News interview aired at 8 p.m. Diane watched from her apartment with Amanda on speakerphone, both of them taking notes. The host, a middle-aged white man named Brent Castor with slicked-back hair and an American flag pin, opened with sympathy. Tonight we speak with Detective Ray Collier, a decorated 18-year law enforcement veteran whose career has been destroyed by one interaction with an allegedly hostile courthouse visitor. Detective Collier, thank you for joining us. Thank you for having me, Collier said. He looked tired, defeated, nothing like the aggressive cop from the security footage. Someone had coached him well: dress shirt, subdued tie, no uniform, humanized the defendant. Tell us what happened that morning, Castor prompted. Collier launched into his narrative. Working emergency shift, unfamiliar with daytime personnel, saw a woman approaching a restricted entrance, asked her to leave. She became hostile and non-compliant. He followed proper protocols for removing her from the area. At any point did this woman identify herself as a federal judge? Castor asked. She made that claim, yes, but people lie all the time to gain access to places they shouldn't be. I've heard every excuse imaginable. Without proper identification, I couldn't verify her claim. Did you ask to see her identification? Slight pause. I asked her to provide it. She refused. That's a lie, Diane said into the phone. I know, Amanda replied. He's rewriting the narrative, but we have audio proving he never asked. On screen, Castor nodded sympathetically. So you were following security protocols doing your job, and now you're facing federal charges. How does that feel? It feels like my entire career, 18 years of service of protecting people, of doing everything by the book, has been reduced to one misunderstanding, one interaction where I didn't recognize someone I'd never met, and now my life is over. Some people are saying this is about race, that you targeted Judge Morrison because she's black. How do you respond to that? I don't see color, Collier said, and Diane laughed bitterly at the tired phrase. I see behavior. And her behavior that morning was suspicious. Anyone acting that way would have been questioned. This isn't about race, it's about security. Yet critics point to a pattern of you stopping minorities more frequently than white courthouse visitors. How do you explain that? I work night shift. The demographics of night shift visitors are different from day shift. I interact with whoever's trying to access the courthouse during my hours. If there's a statistical difference, it's because of timing, not targeting. Smooth, Amanda said on the phone. He's got an answer for everything. Wait for it, Diane replied. He'll slip. They always slip. Castor leaned forward. Let's address the most serious charge: sexual assault. Prosecutors claim you inappropriately touched Judge Morrison during the removal. Can you explain what happened? Collier's face reddened. I conducted a standard pat-down for weapons. She was being physically resistant, non-compliant. For my safety and my partner's safety, I needed to ensure she wasn't armed. My hands went where they needed to go for a thorough search. So you're saying this was proper police procedure? Absolutely. Anyone claiming otherwise has never worked security or law enforcement. When someone's being removed from a premises, you ensure they're not a threat. That's basic training. But Judge Morrison was in business attire, carrying only a briefcase. Did you really think she was armed? You can't make assumptions. I've seen weapons hidden in the most unexpected places. Better to be thorough than sorry. 4 seconds, Diane said into the phone. His hand was on my breast for 4 seconds. That's not a pat-down. Jury will see that, Amanda assured her. No amount of explanation makes 4 seconds appropriate. Castor shifted to his closing pitch. Detective Collier, if you could say anything to Judge Morrison right now, what would it be? Collier looked directly at the camera. I'd say I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. I never intended to make her feel uncomfortable or threatened. I was doing my job to the best of my ability with the information I had. If I'd known she was a judge, of course, I would have acted differently. But I didn't know. And now my career, my reputation, my entire life is being destroyed because of one honest mistake. There it is, Amanda said. The non-apology apology. He's sorry for the misunderstanding, not for assaulting you. Sorry he didn't know you were a judge, not sorry for how he treated you. Everything conditional on your identity rather than his actions. Did you catch the other part? Diane asked. He said if he'd known I was a judge, he would have acted differently. He just admitted on national television that he treats people differently based on their position, that some people deserve respect and others don't. I caught it. That's going in the trial folder. The interview continued for another 10 minutes, Castor lobbing softball questions, Collier positioning himself as a victim of overzealous prosecution and political correctness gone mad. The comments section filled with support from conservative viewers. This is what happens when liberals run the justice system. Cops can't even do their jobs anymore without being called racist. Judge Morrison is the real problem here. But mixed in were other voices. Why didn't he just ask for her ID? 4 seconds is a long time to have your hand on someone's breast. If she'd been white, would he have stopped her at all? When the interview ended, Amanda's voice came through the phone, sharp with satisfaction. He just gave us everything we need. Every answer, every excuse, every justification, all on record, all usable in court. Marcus Chen is going to kill him for doing this interview. Chen probably advised against it, Diane said. But Collier couldn't help himself. He thinks he's right. Thinks he can make people understand if he just explains it properly. That's the problem with men like him. They're so convinced of their own righteousness that they can't see how wrong they are. Well, his righteousness just made our case unbeatable. Get some rest, Diane. Tomorrow's deposition prep, and it's going to be intense. I'll be ready. I know you will. You're the strongest client I've ever worked with. I'm not your client. I'm your ally. And together, we're going to make sure Ray Collier regrets every second of what he did to me. After they hung up, Diane stood at her windows again, looking out at the city that had tried 1,000 times to break her and failed every time. She thought about her father, about all the cases he'd fought and lost because the system was rigged against people who looked like them, about how he'd kept fighting anyway because surrender meant accepting that injustice was inevitable. She wasn't surrendering. She was fighting with every tool at her disposal: legal expertise, judicial authority, media attention, public support. Fighting not just for herself, but for every black woman who'd been Grope dismissed, degraded by men who thought badges excused behavior that would get anyone else arrested. Ray Collier thought he could assault her and walk away. He thought his 18 years of service would protect him. He thought nobody would care about one black woman's complaint against a white cop. He thought wrong, and tomorrow in her deposition she'd begin showing him exactly how wrong. The deposition room felt smaller than it should have, despite being designed for exactly this purpose. Diane sat across from Marcus Chen Collier's defense attorney with Amanda beside her, and a court reporter's fingers poised over the stenograph machine. Collier himself sat at the far end of the table, eyes fixed on the wood grain like it held secrets worth studying. Chen started gently, which meant he was dangerous. Good defense attorneys always started gently. Judge Morrison, thank you for being here today. I know this is difficult. Let's skip the pleasantries, Mr. Chen. Ask your questions. Chen's smile flickered. Very well. Can you describe your typical arrival routine at the courthouse? I arrive between 7 and 7:30 a.m. I use the judicial entrance on the north side, which requires an access card. I proceed directly to my chambers, review the day's docket, and prepare for morning proceedings that begin at 9. And on the morning in question, March 15th, what was different about your routine? The electronic access system at the judicial entrance was malfunctioning. A maintenance notice had been posted the previous evening, but I didn't see it until I arrived that morning. So you were forced to use an entrance you don't typically use. The main entrance, yes. An entrance monitored by security personnel who wouldn't necessarily recognize you. An entrance monitored by Detective Collier, who made no attempt to verify my identity before assaulting me. Chen's pen paused. Let's discuss that interaction. When you approached the entrance, did you present your judicial credentials? I wasn't given the opportunity. Detective Collier stopped me before I reached the security checkpoint. But you were carrying your credentials in my briefcase, along with case files for that morning's docket. Did you tell Detective Collier your credentials were in your briefcase? I told him I worked at the courthouse and needed to access my office. When he challenged that claim, I offered to show him my identification. Offered or actually showed? I reached for my briefcase. He told me not to move and put his hand on his weapon. Collier shifted in his seat. Chen shot him a warning look before continuing. From Detective Collier's perspective, a stranger reaching for a bag after being told to stop might appear threatening. From my perspective, a security officer preventing me from proving my identity while treating me like a criminal might appear racist. Judge Morrison, that's a factual observation based on Detective Collier's behavior. Yes, it is. Amanda covered a smile with her hand. Chen's professional calm was showing cracks. Let's approach this differently. When you told Detective Collier you were a federal judge, what was his response? He laughed. Then he said, and I quote, "You're not a judge. I'd know. I'd have seen the memo." Is it possible he genuinely didn't know about your appointment? It's possible he never bothered to read personnel updates. It's possible he assumed a black woman couldn't be a federal judge. Both possibilities reflect poorly on him. You're making assumptions about his motivations. I'm making observations based on his actions. He stopped me without asking my name. He refused to examine my credentials when I offered them. He dismissed my statement that I was a judge as a lie without attempting any verification. Those are facts, Mr. Chen, not assumptions. Chen flipped through his notes. Let's discuss the physical contact. Detective Collier states he was conducting a security pat-down. Do you dispute that? I dispute that groping constitutes a security pat-down. That's a charged word, Judge Morrison. Can you be more specific about what you mean by groping? Diane's jaw tightened. Amanda put a hand on her arm, but Diane shook her head slightly. She could handle this. Detective Collier placed his hand on my breast and held it there for approximately 4 seconds. His fingers spread across my chest, applying pressure. That's not a pat-down. That's sexual assault. 4 seconds isn't very long. Then let's demonstrate. Mr. Chen, would you allow me to place my hand on your chest for 4 seconds? Chen's face reddened. That's not appropriate. Exactly. So perhaps you can understand why Detective Collier placing his hand on my breast for 4 seconds wasn't appropriate either. He was conducting a security search of my breasts. What exactly did he think I was hiding there? And why did his hand then move to my hip, my waist, my lower back, all while supposedly removing me from the premises? If he was simply escorting me away, why were his hands all over my body? Collier stood abruptly. That's not what happened. I was following proper procedure. Detective Collier, sit down, Chen said sharply. Don't say another word. But Collier was past listening. I didn't assault anyone. I did my job. She's twisting everything because she's angry I didn't recognize her. This whole case is her using her position to punish me for one mistake. One mistake. Diane's voice went cold. Is that what you call putting your hands on my body without consent? A mistake. I was doing a pat-down. You were being non-compliant. I was being a black woman trying to go to work, and you decided that gave you the right to touch me however you wanted. That's not true. I treat everyone the same. Then why have 23 other people come forward with complaints about your behavior? Why do security videos show you stopping minorities at 13 times the rate you stop white visitors? Why does your own supervisor describe you as having issues with diverse populations? Chen grabbed Collier's arm. Ray, stop talking. That's an order from your attorney. But Collier yanked his arm away, face flushed with defensive anger. Those complaints are exaggerated. People play the race card when they don't get their way. I've been doing this job for 18 years. I know who belongs in a courthouse and who doesn't. And black women don't belong. Is that what you're saying? I'm saying I know suspicious behavior when I see it. What was suspicious about me, my expensive suit, my leather briefcase, my professional demeanor, or was it just my skin color that made you suspicious? I don't see color. You see it perfectly well. You just don't see black people as equals. Collier slammed his hand on the table. I've worked with black officers. I've protected black judges. Judges, Washington and Freeman. Both men, both older, both matching your idea of what authority looks like. But me, a 42-year-old black woman, I didn't match your mental image, so I couldn't possibly be legitimate. You're putting words in my mouth. I'm repeating words you said on Fox News. You admitted that if you'd known I was a judge, you would have acted differently, which means you treat people differently based on their position rather than their humanity. Chen was frantically scribbling notes. We're taking a break. This deposition is— No. Collier interrupted. I want to say this. I want it on record. Ray, as your attorney, I strongly advise— I don't care. She's sitting there acting like I'm some kind of predator when I was just doing my job. Yeah, maybe I should have asked for her ID differently. Maybe I should have been more polite. But I didn't assault her. I didn't grope her. I conducted a lawful pat-down of someone who was being removed from courthouse property. For 4 seconds, your hand stayed on my breast for 4 full seconds. I was being thorough. You were being a predator hiding behind a badge. Collier's face went purple. How dare you? How dare I? How dare you put your hands on me? How dare you treat me like I was nothing? How dare you assume I belonged in a welfare office instead of a courtroom? How dare you laugh when I told you I was a judge? How dare you touch my body like you owned it? I was following protocol. There is no protocol that justifies what you did. And you know it. That's why you're so angry right now. Because deep down, you know exactly what you did, and you know it was wrong. Silence fell over the room like a blanket. The court reporter's fingers had stopped moving. Amanda sat perfectly still. Chen looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Collier's voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. I didn't mean to make you feel violated. But you did, and feeling sorry about it now doesn't change what you did or why you did it. I made a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to stop me. You chose not to verify my credentials. You chose to put your hands on my body. Those were choices, Detective Collier, not mistakes. And choices have consequences. Chen finally regained control. We're done here. This deposition is over. We have 40 minutes left on the schedule, Amanda said. I don't care. My client isn't saying another word. Judge Morrison has made her position abundantly clear, and anything else Detective Collier says will only be used against him. Diane stood gathering her notes. Good. Then we understand each other. I'll see you in court, Mr. Chen. And Detective Collier. You might want to think carefully about testifying at trial, because if you thought this was difficult, cross-examination will destroy you. She walked out without looking back, Amanda hurrying to catch up. In the hallway, Amanda grabbed her arm. That was either brilliant or insane. I can't decide which. It was necessary. Collier needed to understand that I'm not backing down, that I'm not going to let him play the victim. You got him to admit things Chen will spend weeks trying to undo. The 4 seconds comment, the treating people differently based on position, his anger about the race card, that's all gold for trial. Good. Because this case isn't just about me anymore. It's about every person Collier has harassed, every complaint his supervisor dismissed, every time the system protected him instead of his victims. They reached the elevator. As the doors closed, Amanda said quietly, You know they're going to come after you hard now. Collier's lawyers, conservative media, police unions. They'll dig up everything they can find to discredit you. Let them dig. I've lived my life according to the law. I've got nothing to hide. Everyone has something. An old relationship, a controversial ruling, a statement taken out of context. They'll find it and weaponize it. Then I'll deal with it when it comes. But I won't back down. I won't accept a plea deal. I won't settle quietly and make this go away. Ray Collier assaulted a federal judge and he's going to prison for it. The trial began 6 weeks later in a courtroom 3 floors above the one where Diane normally presided. Judge Robert Harrison, appointed by Reagan and known for running a tight ship, would oversee the proceedings. The jury, 7 women, 5 men representing diverse backgrounds, had been seated after 4 days of careful selection. Diane sat in the front row behind the prosecution table, wearing a navy suit that projected authority without ostentation. She'd recused herself from all judicial duties until the trial concluded, couldn't preside over her own courtroom while testifying as a victim in another. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Amanda stood to deliver opening arguments, and Diane watched her with professional appreciation. Good prosecutors made justice look effortless. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about power and how it's abused. On March 15th of this year, Detective Ray Collier had power a badge, a gun authority to control who entered the federal courthouse. Judge Diane Morrison had credentials, a law degree from Harvard, 12 years as a federal prosecutor, a judicial appointment confirmed by the United States Senate. But when they met that morning, Detective Collier made a choice. He chose to see Judge Morrison's skin color instead of her credentials. He chose to assume she was a criminal instead of asking who she was. And he chose to put his hands on her body in ways that had nothing to do with security and everything to do with asserting dominance over someone he assumed was powerless. Amanda walked to the jury box. The defense will tell you this was a misunderstanding, that Detective Collier didn't know Judge Morrison was a judge, that he was following proper security protocols. But ask yourselves, why didn't he know? Because he never asked. Why didn't he verify her credentials? Because he assumed they didn't exist. Why did his hands linger on her body during the removal? Because he could. Because he thought no one would believe her. Because 18 years of getting away with discriminatory behavior taught him that badges protect bad cops. She paused, letting the words sink in. You're going to see video evidence from 7 different cameras. You're going to hear testimony from witnesses who watched this assault happen in real time. You're going to see statistical analysis proving Detective Collier targets minorities at dramatically higher rates than white visitors. And you're going to hear from Judge Morrison herself about what it feels like to be groped by a man sworn to protect you. When you've seen all that evidence, I'm confident you'll reach the only verdict supported by the facts, guilty on all counts. Chen stood for the defense, looking tired before he'd even begun. Members of the jury, Detective Ray Collier is not on trial for being a perfect officer. He's on trial for actions the prosecution wants to paint as criminal when they were actually the result of doing his job under difficult circumstances. On the morning of March 15th, Detective Collier was covering an emergency shift hours. He rarely worked personnel he didn't know. When he saw someone approaching a restricted entrance, he did what he was trained to do: verify authorization. Was he perfect in how he handled the situation? No. Should he have asked more questions before taking action? Perhaps. But does imperfect performance of security duties equal federal crimes? Absolutely not. Chen moved toward the jury, hands open in appeal. The prosecution wants you to see racism where there was only caution. They want you to see sexual assault where there was only a security pat-down. They want you to believe Detective Collier targeted Judge Morrison because of her race, when the truth is simpler: he didn't recognize her and was doing his job. Yes, it turned out she was a federal judge. Yes, the situation could have been handled better, but mistakes aren't crimes, and we're asking you to remember that as you hear the evidence. The first prosecution witness was Jennifer Davis, Diane's court clerk. She testified about Diane's normal routine, her professionalism, the malfunctioning entrance that forced the change in pattern. "How long have you worked with Judge Morrison?" Amanda asked. 6 weeks at the time of the incident. But I'd known her reputation for years. She was a legend in the prosecutor's office, never lost a major case in 12 years. And in your experience working with her, had she ever been anything other than professional and punctual? Never. Judge Morrison is the most dedicated jurist I've ever worked with. She arrives early, stays late, reads every brief thoroughly. That morning when she wasn't in chambers by 8, I knew something was wrong. "What did you do?" I called her cell. She didn't answer. So I went looking and found courthouse security in chaos. Someone said a woman had been removed from the premises by Detective Collier. I had this sinking feeling, so I checked the security footage. "What did you see on that footage?" Jennifer's voice shook slightly. "I saw Judge Morrison being grabbed by 2 officers, saw Detective Collier's hands on her body, saw her being dragged across the plaza like she was a criminal. I ran outside and found her sitting on a bench briefcase in her lap, looking absolutely devastated." "What did she say to you?" She said, "Jennifer, I need you to document everything, every camera angle, every witness statement, every second of what just happened, because I'm going to make sure this never happens to anyone else." Chen cross-examined carefully. "Miss Davis, you admire Judge Morrison greatly, don't you?" "I respect her, yes." "You'd do anything to support her." "I'd tell the truth to support justice, which is what I'm doing now." But you weren't present during the actual incident. You only saw footage afterward. You don't know what Judge Morrison said to Detective Collier or how she behaved. I know she's a federal judge who was assaulted by courthouse security. That's all I need to know. The next witness was Thomas Warren, a court clerk who'd arrived early and witnessed the incident firsthand. His testimony was damning. I was walking up the courthouse steps when I saw Detective Collier grab this woman in a business suit. My first thought was that something was wrong. She looked professional, was carrying an expensive briefcase, didn't seem like someone who'd be causing trouble. But Collier was being really aggressive, yelling at her about using the wrong entrance. Could you hear what was being said? Some of it. He told her she belonged at the welfare office, called her sweetheart in this condescending way. When she tried to explain she worked there, he basically called her a liar. Did you recognize the woman as Judge Morrison? Not at first. I'd only met her once briefly. But when Collier started the pat-down, that's when I recognized her. And I remember thinking, oh my God, he doesn't know who she is. What did you observe during this pat-down? Warren's face showed clear discomfort. His hands were all over her. I've seen security pat-downs before. They're quick, professional. This wasn't that. His hand stayed on her chest way too long, then her hip, then her lower back. It looked like groping disguised as security procedure. Did you intervene? I should have. I regret that I didn't. But he's a cop and I'm a clerk. I didn't think I had the authority to question what he was doing. Chen tried to poke holes. Mr. Warren, you said you'd only met Judge Morrison once before this incident. How can you be certain you recognized her? Because I remember thinking she was impressive for someone so young. When I saw her face during the pat-down, I knew it was her. You were 20 feet away. Could you really see facial expressions clearly? Clear enough to see she was furious and humiliated. Clear enough to know something very wrong was happening. But not clear enough to intervene, apparently. I was scared. Detective Collier was aggressive, physical. I thought he might turn on me if I said anything, so I stayed quiet and hated myself for it. The honesty seemed to catch Chen off guard. He had no follow-up. Amanda called Dr. Sarah Martinez, the FBI training instructor who specialized in proper search procedures. She walked the jury through exactly what a lawful pat-down looked like versus what Collier had done. A proper pat-down uses the back of the hand, not the palm. Quick brushing motions, not sustained pressure. The officer announces what they're doing and why. They avoid sensitive areas unless there's specific reason to believe a weapon is concealed there. Detective Collier violated every one of those principles. She pulled up the video freeze-framed on Collier's hand, spread across Diane's breast. This position with fingers spread and palm pressed against the chest has no legitimate security purpose. This is not how you check for weapons. This is how you assert dominance through inappropriate touching. In your expert opinion, was Detective Collier conducting a lawful security pat-down? No. He was sexually assaulting Judge Morrison while using his badge as cover. Chen challenged her credentials, her methodology, her interpretation of the video. None of it stuck. Dr. Martinez had testified in hundreds of cases, and her expertise was unassailable. Then came the statistical analysis from Dr. James Chen, a sociology professor who'd spent weeks reviewing courthouse security footage. His findings were devastating. Over 8 months of footage, Detective Collier stopped 83 individuals for additional screening. 72 of those individuals were people of color. 11 were white. That's an 87% targeting rate for minorities versus 13% for white individuals, despite courthouse visitors being roughly 40% white during his shifts. Could this disparity be explained by legitimate security concerns? No. When I analyzed the circumstances of each stop, I found no consistent criteria beyond race. Professional attire didn't prevent stops for minorities, but seemed to guarantee access for white visitors. Carrying briefcases, looking nervous, arriving early. None of these factors correlated with being stopped, except when combined with non-white appearance. What does this pattern suggest to you? It suggests systematic racial profiling by Detective Collier, likely unconscious, but nonetheless discriminatory. The evidence mounted day after day, witness after witness, video after video, each piece building an undeniable picture of Ray Collier as a man whose racism had finally targeted someone with the power to hold him accountable. And through it all, Diane sat in the front row taking notes, watching justice slowly grind its way toward the truth she'd always known: power meant nothing if you couldn't use it to protect the powerless. Because that's what she was doing now. Not just seeking justice for herself, but for every victim Collier had harassed, every complaint his supervisor had dismissed, every black person who'd been made to feel unwelcome in a building dedicated to justice. The trial was far from over. Her own testimony still waited. Collier's defense still loomed. But sitting there watching prosecutors systematically dismantle the lies that had protected him for 18 years, Diane felt something she hadn't felt since that March morning. She felt powerful again, and Ray Collier was about to learn what real power looked like. On the 6th day of trial, Amanda called Diane to the stand. The courtroom went silent as she walked to the witness box, raised her right hand, and swore to tell the truth. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, a federal judge swearing an oath in someone else's courtroom because she'd been assaulted in her own. "Please state your name for the record," Amanda began. "Diane Catherine Morrison. And your current occupation." "I'm a federal judge for the Southern District of New York, appointed 6 months ago and confirmed by the United States Senate." "Before your judicial appointment, what was your profession?" "I was a federal prosecutor for 12 years. I specialized in civil rights violations, hate crimes, and corruption cases. My conviction rate was 94%. Amanda let that number hang in the air. 94%. This wasn't some random victim. This was a woman who'd built a career on holding criminals accountable. "Judge Morrison, can you describe your educational background?" "I graduated summa cum laude from Howard University, then attended Harvard Law School, where I was an editor of the Law Review. After graduation, I clerked for Judge Patricia Williams before joining the U.S. Attorney's Office." "So you're familiar with law enforcement procedures, courtroom protocols, and the federal justice system?" "Intimately familiar. I've worked within that system my entire adult life." "Then let's discuss March 15th. Walk us through that morning." Diane took a breath, steadying herself. She'd testified in hundreds of trials, but always as a prosecutor, never as a victim. The shift in perspective felt disorienting. "I arrived at the courthouse at 7:15 a.m., which is my usual time. I prefer arriving early to review case files and prepare for the day's docket, but when I reached the judicial entrance I normally use, I found it blocked with an out-of-order sign. The electronic access system had malfunctioned." "What did you do?" "I walked around to the main entrance. I'd used it before when the judicial entrance was being cleaned or serviced. It wasn't my preference, too much foot traffic, too many people, but it was the only option that morning." "And what happened when you approached that entrance?" "Detective Collier stopped me before I reached the security checkpoint. He positioned himself directly in my path and told me I was using the wrong entrance." "What did you say?" "I explained that my usual entrance was malfunctioning and I needed to access my chambers. I was calm professional. I've dealt with security misunderstandings before." "How did Detective Collier respond?" Diane's jaw tightened at the memory. "He said, 'This entrance is for real people.' Then he looked me up and down and added, 'Defendant check-in is around back. Can't miss it, just follow the other welfare cases.'" Gasps from the gallery. One juror's mouth fell open. Even Judge Harrison's eyebrows rose. "He assumed you were a defendant. He assumed I was a criminal, based solely on my appearance. Did you correct him?" "I told him I worked at the courthouse, that I had professional obligations requiring access to my chambers. He laughed and said people like me always have excuses. People like you. What did you understand that to mean? Black people. He meant black people. It was clear from his tone, his body language, his entire demeanor." Chen started to object, but Judge Harrison waved him down. "The witness can testify to her own perceptions, counselor." Amanda continued. "What happened next?" "I remained calm. I've learned over the years that showing anger as a black woman only confirms people's worst assumptions. So I explained again that I worked there and offered to show him my credentials." "How did he respond to that offer?" He told me not to reach for my briefcase, put his hand on his weapon like I was a threat. I'm standing there in a business suit at 7 in the morning, and he's treating me like an armed suspect. Did he ask your name? No. Did he ask what department you worked for? No. Did he ask to see any identification? No. He made assumptions and acted on them without bothering to verify a single fact. What did you do then? I told him I was a federal judge, said my name clearly, Judge Diane Morrison, told him I was scheduled to preside over the 9 a.m. criminal docket in courtroom 6A. And his reaction, Diane's voice went flat with remembered humiliation. He laughed in my face, said, "You're not a judge. I'd know. I'd have seen the memo." Like the idea of me being a judge was so absurd it couldn't possibly be true. Did you try to convince him? I told him to check with the court administrator's office, told him to look at the daily roster, told him to do literally anything to verify my identity before making a bigger mistake. He refused, said he didn't need to check anything because his instincts told him I didn't belong. Then what happened? This was the hard part. Diane felt her throat tighten but pushed through. She'd testified through worse. She'd questioned rape victims, abuse survivors, people who'd suffered unimaginable trauma. She could do this. He grabbed my arm, hard. His partner, Officer Hammond, took my other arm, and Detective Collier said he was removing me from the premises for being non-compliant. Were you being non-compliant? I was being a black woman who dared to insist I belonged somewhere. A white cop decided I didn't. That's what he considered non-compliant. Describe the physical contact that followed. Diane's hands clenched in her lap. They started pulling me backward away from the entrance. I didn't fight, didn't struggle. I let them pull me because I knew cameras were recording, and I needed documentation of exactly what they were doing. And what were they doing? Detective Collier's hands moved from my arms to my shoulders, then across my chest. His palm pressed against my breast and stayed there. 4 seconds. I counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4. His fingers spread across my chest, applying pressure while he claimed he was conducting a security pat-down. Several jurors looked away, uncomfortable. One woman wrapped her arms around herself. What did that feel like? Like violation. Like every assumption about black women being available for white men's hands was being acted out on my body while witnesses watched and did nothing. Like 18 years of Detective Collier getting away with this behavior had taught him that badges excuse assault. Did you say anything? I told him to let go. He ignored me. His hand moved to my hip, then my waist, then my lower back, all while supposedly removing me from the courthouse. But if he was just escorting me away, why were his hands all over my body? What happened when you reached the public sidewalk? They released me. Detective Collier stood there looking satisfied, like he'd accomplished something important. Told me I could file a complaint if I wanted, but it wouldn't go anywhere. Said I was non-compliant with security and he'd followed proper protocols. How did that make you feel? Powerless, which is exactly how he wanted me to feel. He thought grabbing a black woman's breast was consequence-free because who would believe me over a cop with 18 years of service? But you're not powerless, are you, Judge Morrison? No, I'm not. And that's what he failed to understand until it was too late. Amanda walked to the evidence table and picked up Diane's briefcase, the same one from that morning now tagged as Exhibit A. What happened to this briefcase during the removal? It scraped across concrete as they dragged me, got scratched, scuffed. I've kept it that way as a reminder. A reminder of what? That dignity matters more than designer leather, that letting them finish their assault mattered more than protecting my possessions, that building an unassailable case mattered more than my pride in that moment. You could have identified yourself as a judge immediately, ended the whole thing with 2 words. Why didn't you? Diane looked directly at the jury. Because I needed them to reveal exactly who they were. If I'd said I'm a judge right away, they would have apologized maybe, claimed confusion, made it about mistaken identity instead of what it really was, racial profiling and sexual assault. I needed the cameras to capture everything so there could be no excuses, no explanations, no dismissing it as a misunderstanding. So you let them assault you. I documented them assaulting me. There's a difference. Amanda returned to the prosecution table, giving the testimony time to sink in. Then she asked quietly, "Judge Morrison, in your 12 years as a federal prosecutor and 6 months as a federal judge, have you ever been treated the way Detective Collier treated you that morning?" "Not by someone in uniform. I've faced racism my entire life. Subtle discrimination, microaggressions, assumptions about my competence. But having a cop physically assault me while I tried to go to work, that was new." "How has this incident affected you?" Diane paused, considering. She could downplay it, maintain her professional armor, or she could tell the truth. "I'm afraid now. Every time I enter that courthouse, I wonder if someone else will decide I don't belong. I second-guess my clothing choices, my hairstyle, my briefcase, wondering if looking too black will make me a target. I've presided over serious criminal cases without fear, sentenced violent offenders without hesitation. But a courthouse cop made me afraid to go to work." "Do you still experience physical effects?" "I can't stand being touched unexpectedly. If someone bumps into me in a crowd, I flinch. My clerk has learned to announce herself before approaching my desk. These are trauma responses, and I'm working through them in therapy. But they're real, and they're Detective Collier's fault." Amanda let silence fill the courtroom. "No further questions, Your Honor." Chen stood for cross-examination, and Diane braced herself. Good defense attorneys could make victims sound unreliable even when telling the truth. "Judge Morrison, you testified that you've dealt with security misunderstandings before. How many times?" 3 or 4 over the years." "And how were those resolved?" "I showed my credentials and was allowed to pass." "So the normal procedure is to show credentials when asked, correct?" "When asked, yes. Detective Collier never asked. But you could have volunteered them, pulled out your judicial ID without being asked. Why didn't you?" "Because I shouldn't have to prove my humanity before being treated with basic dignity." "That's a philosophical position, Judge Morrison, not a practical one. If you'd simply shown your ID, if Detective Collier had simply asked for it instead of assuming I was a criminal, none of this would have happened. You're blaming me for his failure to follow basic verification procedures." Chen shifted tactics. "You testified that you let Detective Collier finish the assault so you could document it. That's a calculated decision, isn't it?" "It was a strategic decision based on 12 years of prosecuting cases where victims were dismissed as unreliable. I knew if I ended it quickly he'd claim misunderstanding, so I let him show exactly who he was." "Some might say that's manipulative, using your legal knowledge to set up a police officer. Some might say that's ensuring justice when the system routinely fails victims like me. I made it impossible for Detective Collier to claim confusion or accident. His assault was captured from 7 camera angles with crystal clarity. That's not manipulation. That's evidence. But you admit you were thinking like a prosecutor, not a victim. I'm both. And being a prosecutor made me a more effective victim because I knew how to preserve evidence that would hold up in court." Chen tried another angle. "You've testified about feeling violated, traumatized, but you continued presiding over your courtroom that same day, didn't you?" "Yes." "Made rulings, heard arguments, performed your judicial duties." "Yes." "So the trauma couldn't have been that severe if you were able to work normally." Diane's eyes flashed. "Mr. Chen, I've presided over cases while dealing with migraines, family emergencies, and grief. I once finished a sentencing hearing the same day my father died because justice doesn't wait for personal trauma to resolve. My ability to perform my job despite being assaulted doesn't mean the assault wasn't traumatic. It means I'm professional enough to compartmentalize when necessary. Or it means you're exaggerating the impact for sympathy. It means I refuse to let Ray Collier's assault define me. He wanted to make me feel powerless. I won't give him that satisfaction." Chen pulled out transcripts from Diane's previous cases. "As a prosecutor, you were known for being aggressive in cross-examination, weren't you?" "I was known for being thorough and effective." "You made witnesses uncomfortable with your questioning style." "I made guilty people uncomfortable with their lies. That was my job." Some defense attorneys described you as hostile, confrontational, using your position to intimidate. Amanda objected. "Relevance, Your Honor." "I'm establishing character, Your Honor. Judge Morrison presents herself as a victim, but her professional reputation suggests someone who uses authority aggressively. Perhaps Detective Collier sensed that aggression and responded appropriately. Judge Harrison's voice went cold. "Counselor, are you seriously suggesting that being an effective prosecutor justifies sexual assault?" "I'm suggesting that Judge Morrison may have contributed to the confrontational nature of the interaction." "By existing while black," Diane cut in. "By having the audacity to try entering a courthouse, by failing to immediately prostrate myself before Detective Collier's authority, by being evasive about your identity." "I wasn't evasive. I told him exactly who I was. He chose not to believe me." "Because you didn't show identification when requested." "Because he never requested it. We're going in circles, Mr. Chen, because your client's actions are indefensible, and you're desperately trying to blame me for his assault." Chen's face reddened. "I'm trying to establish that this situation was more complex than the prosecution suggests. It's very simple. A white cop saw a black woman, assumed she was a criminal, and assaulted her when she insisted otherwise. The complexity you're inventing doesn't exist." "Your Honor, the witness is being argumentative." "The witness is being honest," Judge Harrison said. "If you can't handle honest answers, ask different questions." Chen tried a few more angles, questioning whether Diane's memory was accurate, whether her trauma claims were exaggerated, whether her pursuit of prosecution was vindictive rather than justice-seeking. Nothing stuck. Diane had spent 12 years anticipating defense strategies, and her answers were airtight. When Chen finally gave up and sat down, Diane left the witness stand feeling lighter. She'd told her story, made the jury understand not just what happened, but what it meant. Now it was in their hands. The prosecution rested. Chen called his own witnesses character witnesses for Collier security experts who tried to justify the pat-down a psychologist who claimed Collier had simply made an honest mistake based on limited information. But the defense's biggest problem walked into the courtroom on day 8, Ray Collier himself. Chen had agonized over whether to put him on the stand, but without his testimony, they had no counter-narrative, just videos and witnesses, all supporting Diane's version. Collier took the oath and sat down looking smaller somehow than he had that March morning. Prison Orange would do that to a man, and he'd been held without bail since the indictment came down. Chen walked him through the same story he'd told on Fox News. Emergency shift. Unfamiliar personnel. Suspicious behavior. Lawful pat-down. Honest mistake. Then Amanda stood for cross-examination and the temperature in the courtroom dropped 10 degrees. "Detective Collier, you've testified that you don't see race. Is that correct?" "Yes." "Yet we have video evidence of you stopping minorities at 13 times the rate of white visitors. How do you explain that different demographics during night shift? We have videos from day shifts you covered. Same pattern. How do you explain that?" I can't speak to statistical analysis. I just know I treat everyone equally." "You treat everyone equally, yet you told Judge Morrison to find the welfare office. Did you tell any white visitors that?" "I don't recall." "We have footage going back 8 months. You've never directed a white person to the welfare office. Not once. But you've said it to 7 black visitors. All 7. How is that treating everyone equally?" Collier's face flushed. "Those were different situations." "Different how? Be specific." They seemed out of place. Out of place how? They didn't look like they belonged in professional settings. What does belonging in professional settings look like, Detective Collier?" Silence. The trap had sprung and Collier knew it. Any answer would confirm his racism. "I mean, they seemed nervous, uncertain." Judge Morrison seemed nervous. She seemed evasive. Evasive how she told you her name, her position offered to show credentials. What part of that was evasive? She wouldn't show me her ID when I asked. "You never asked. We have audio from your body camera. Not once did you say, 'May I see your identification?' Not once. You told her she didn't belong and should leave. Those aren't verification questions. Those are dismissals." "I was following my training. Your training that you refused to update for 6 years. The diversity training you missed 22 times. That training. I had schedule conflicts. But no conflicts attending firearms training overtime, certification or recreational golf with your supervisor who dismissed complaints about your racist behavior." Chen objected, but the damage was done. Amanda pulled up the video, froze it on Collier's hand, spread across Diane's breast. "Explain this position, Detective. What security purpose does holding your palm against a woman's breast for 4 seconds serve? I was checking for concealed weapons. With your palm flat against her chest, not the back of your hand as FBI training requires, not a quick brush, but sustained pressure. I was being thorough. You were being a predator, and you thought your badge would protect you, didn't you? No, I. You've gotten away with discriminatory behavior for 18 years, complaints dismissed victims, ignored supervisors covering for you. You thought assaulting one more black woman would be consequence-free. Admit it. That's not true. Then why did you laugh when Judge Morrison told you she was a judge? If you were truly confused, truly trying to verify credentials, why was your first reaction laughter? I thought she was lying. Why? What made you so certain a black woman couldn't be a federal judge? I didn't think that. Then what did you think? Explain why telling you she was a judge struck you as so absurd you laughed in her face. Collier's mouth opened and closed. No answer emerged that wouldn't confirm his racism. You can't explain it, can you? Because the truth is, you never imagined someone who looks like Judge Morrison could hold authority over you. Your entire worldview is built on black people being subordinate. And when she challenged that worldview by existing in a position of power, you assaulted her. I made a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to see her skin color instead of her credentials. You chose to dismiss her statement about being a judge. You chose to put your hands on her body. Those were choices, detective. And now you're facing consequences for those choices. How does that feel? Objection. Chen was on his feet. Counsel is badgering the witness. Sustained. Ms. Chen asked questions rather than making speeches. Amanda nodded. Detective Collier, do you believe you sexually assaulted Judge Morrison? No. Even though your hand was on her breast for 4 seconds. That was a pat-down. Even though you groped her hip, her waist, her lower back, while supposedly removing her from the premises. I was maintaining control. Even though 23 other people have come forward describing similar inappropriate touching during your security interactions. Collier's eyes widened. Those complaints are false. All 23, every single person is lying except you. People exaggerate. Or maybe you've been assaulting people for years and finally targeted someone with the power to hold you accountable. Which is it, detective? Are 23 people coordinating a vast conspiracy against you? Or are you a racist sexual predator who got caught? I'm not a predator. Then what are you? Collier's face crumpled. The confidence, the defensiveness, the righteous indignation, all of it collapsed under the weight of evidence he couldn't explain away. I'm a cop who made a mistake, he whispered. No, Detective Collier. You're a criminal who wore a badge while committing crimes, and this jury is going to hold you accountable. Amanda sat down. Chen had no redirect that could salvage the disaster. Collier had admitted his actions while denying their meaning, confirmed the pattern while claiming coincidence, and revealed the racism underneath his denials. Closing arguments were formalities after that. Amanda summarized the overwhelming evidence. Chen pleaded for mercy based on 18 years of service. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes, long enough to elect a foreman and take a careful vote. When they returned, the forewoman stood. On the charge of federal civil rights violations, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of sexual assault under color of law, guilty. On the charge of deprivation of rights under color of law, guilty. Collier collapsed in his chair. His wife, sitting in the gallery, sobbed. But Diane felt only cold satisfaction. Not joy, not triumph, just the grim certainty that justice had finally arrived. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Judge Harrison, who'd presided with fairness throughout, showed no mercy now. Detective Collier, you violated your oath, betrayed your badge, and assaulted a federal judge. You used your authority to prey on someone you assumed was powerless. That assumption was wrong, but your intentions were clear. You are sentenced to 4 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years supervised release. You will register as a sex offender. You are permanently barred from law enforcement, and you will pay restitution to Judge Morrison in the amount of $500,000. The gavel fell. Collier was led away in chains, and Diane walked out of that courtroom knowing she'd done what her father had spent his career trying to do, hold the system accountable when it failed the people it was supposed to protect. 6 months later, the Morrison protocols were implemented in federal courthouses nationwide. Independent oversight, mandatory bias training, body cameras, real consequences for discrimination. Diane's assault had changed the system not just for herself, but for everyone who came after. She stood in her chambers, now looking at the photograph on her desk, her father in his law office, surrounded by case files fighting for civil rights in a South that didn't want to change. She'd finished what he started, used her power to protect the powerless, made sure one cop's racism didn't go unpunished. Ray Collier had assumed she was nothing. He learned she was everything he should have been afraid of. And sometimes that's what justice looks like, the powerful discovering that power isn't about badges or guns or authority. It's about truth. And truth, when spoken by someone who refused to be silenced, can bring down empires built on lies.